I grew up in rural Texas. Well, semi-rural, anyway. The street we lived on ended in a cul-de-sac, and at the end, behind a cheap metal gate, was a short drive that ended in a dense wooded expanse something like a half-mile deep before ending at a fence just the other side of a small meandering creek. The woods were dense with spiders, mostly a mix of garden and orb weavers, and the trees were often interlaced with webs and forced the neighborhood kids to slow down when exploring. But it looked beautiful in a kind of haunting way, in the early morning when the dew on the webs caught sunlight. I spent a lot of weekends down by that creek with my siblings and friends. The trek was just uncomfortable enough that our parents generally couldn't be bothered to come get us themselves unless we pushed our luck too long, and the property owners were virtually never there, so it became a sanctuary for us to be away from such unpleasant things as homework and chores. The creek had some small fish in it most years, especially when the rain came heavy. I was no great angler, but I managed to bring in a bluegill now and again. We would camp there sometimes when the weather was good. Squirrels made clever by generations of country brats with BB guns and .22 caliber rifles dodged between the trees while bird song mixed with static-laced rock and roll from an old radio. One summer, my brother and I undertook a monumental engineering project. We constructed a bridge over the creek. It was a simple old board liberated from an old storage shed, nailed to two small trees felled across the water, but it gave us something to do for a few days and something to sit on and think or not think for a couple of years. As we got older, I learned it was a great place to enjoy carefully acquired beer and pot, and that many of the girls and a few boys my age considered the ambiance romantic in a way that made their clothes come off in my tent. Some of my happier memories of my high school years were made this way. Then I went to college, and faster than I care to admit, Houston sucked me in at last, no longer in its orbit, but immersed in the noises and smells of life in a very, very big city. I made new friends, new memories, and new mistakes. I visited home, but for years, I had better things to do than stomp around in the woods among the spiders and mosquitoes. When I did set foot beside that creek again, it was on a whim of my brother, who was himself coming into adulthood and wanted to share a walk with me while I was home. I discovered that the place had changed since I had been there last. The homeowners had cleared much of the undergrowth and some of the trees, drastically reducing the number of spider webs and robbing the woods of their former ethereal quality. The mosquitoes were worse than I ever remembered, and had a feast out of both of us by the time we made it to the creek. The bridge we had built was gone, washed away in a flood 2 years before. The campsite had been moved back from the bank and was now supplemented with a proper fire pit. We spent a few hours drinking slightly cool beer and passing a pipe back and forth, talking about everything and nothing. Remembered good times, agreed we should come back and do this again sometime before returning to have dinner with our parents and go about our now much busier lives. I never did go back. That is probably the last happy memory of my brother I have now. A year later, my parents sold their house and moved to the suburbs, and my brother, well, his story is a separate issue, but we aren't close these days. I regret not taking a fishing pole with me that last time.